They set my daughter at the entrance of Pacific Central Station, like luggage no one had come to collect. Her, my 5-year-old grandson, and 2 suitcases. Her mother-in-law had made it very plain that she no longer fit. Her husband had stood in the hallway and watched it happen. I told her to get in the car. What none of them knew, not her mother-in-law, not her husband, not his father, was that the company they had used to strip everything from her was mine, and I was about to take it back. Welcome to today's story. Before we go any further, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. A quick note: this story contains dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. While names and specific details may be fictionalized, the core lessons about recognizing financial abuse and coercive control are real, and they happen to real families every single day. Now, let's begin. The late afternoon light over False Creek was flat and gray when my driver pulled up to the station. I had been trying my daughter's phone since noon. She never goes more than an hour without answering me. Never. In 34 years, I have learned to read her silences the way you learn to read weather when you learn to read weather when you live on the coast long enough. I knew before I saw her. She was sitting on a bench near the front entrance, her coat buttoned against the November cold, her shoulders drawn in like she was trying to make herself smaller than she already was. My grandson was pressed against her side, 5 years old in a red wool hat, one hand gripping a small stuffed dinosaur with the grip of someone who has been told very little but understands more than the adults in the room imagine. The kind of toy a child grabs when there's no time to choose, when someone rushes you out the door. I didn't run. I haven't run toward anything in 20 years, but I have never wanted to more than I did in that moment. I walked across the lobby the way I have walked into every difficult conversation, every board meeting, every negotiation where someone expected me to blink, deliberately and without apology. She looked up when she heard my heels on the tile. "Mom, just the one word. It came out in pieces." I sat beside her. My grandson looked at me with his father's eyes and his mother's way of tilting his head when he's trying to understand something. "Grandma," he said, "why are we here?" I pulled his hat down more firmly over his ears. "We're going somewhere better, somewhere warm." Then I looked at my daughter and I asked her to tell me everything. Her mother-in-law had called her into the kitchen that morning, had stood at the island with a composure that was really just another word for cruelty, and told my daughter that she had never truly been what the family needed. That her background wasn't what they'd expected. That it would be better for everyone, the family, the children, the future, if Sky found her own arrangements. Her husband had been in the hallway the entire time. He had not said a single word in her defense. And 3 days earlier, her father-in-law had sent an email, brief, corporate, bloodless, informing her that her position at the company was being eliminated. Restructuring. No further explanation. After 3 years of her best work, the years she had given that company, because she believed it was her family's. "He just watched," she said. "My husband. He just stood there." I took her hand. "Get in the car." My driver had the trunk open. He loaded the suitcases without a word, held the door, and didn't ask questions, which is what I pay him for, and also why I trust him. My daughter stared out the window as we crossed back over the bridge. My grandson fell asleep, somewhere near the approach to West Vancouver, his head against his mother's arm, the dinosaur tucked under his chin. I watched the city go past and thought very carefully about what came next. My home sits on a half-acre above the inlet. I built it in 1997, the year I finally had enough in the account to spend money on something other than payroll and contingencies. I built it so that my daughter would have somewhere solid to come back to, no matter what. It turned out I was right to do that. I showed them to the guest suite, turned on the heated floors, left fresh towels, closed the curtains. "You're safe," I told her. She nodded. Her eyes didn't believe me yet. I waited until I heard the water running. Then I went down to my study, poured 2 fingers of single malt, and made a call. Laurent answered before the second ring. He has worked with me for 14 years. He used to run financial investigations for a Bay Street firm, and he is the most thorough person I have ever employed, which is a significant statement. I need a full audit, I said. Everything connected to the Alderton Group, every account, every transaction, every contract, every piece of paper my son-in-law's father has touched in the past 4 years. How long do I have? 48 hours. A pause. It'll be done. I set the phone down and stood at the window, watching the lights come on across the inlet, one by one, the way certainty sometimes comes, not all at once, but steadily, until you can see clearly enough to move. Here is what my daughter didn't know, what my son-in-law and his parents didn't know, what no one in that family had ever been intended to know. The Alderton Group, the Vancouver-based freight forwarding company my son-in-law's father had built his entire identity around, had been majority owned by me since its founding, owned through a numbered British Columbia holding company, held by a family trust managed through a firm in Calgary. My name appeared nowhere in the public record. The operating agreement gave me 61% of the shares and full rights to direct the board, rights I had chosen not to exercise. Until now. When my daughter came home with an engagement ring and a man I had quiet reservations about, I made inquiries. I do this. It is not paranoia. It is diligence. I built a company with nothing except the willingness to look carefully at things other people preferred to leave unexamined. What I found about my son-in-law's father was enough. A pattern of partnerships that had ended badly for the other party. A reputation in certain circles as someone who operated at the edge of what the paperwork could be made to support. A family that had money but wasn't clear on where it had come from or where it was going. So when the Alderton Group came looking for a capital partner the following year, I made myself available. Through the trust, at arm's length, with terms structured carefully enough that they would, after 5 years, make me the controlling party. My son-in-law's father signed the agreement in a boardroom on Burrard Street without, apparently, reading it closely enough. I needed to see what they would do when they believed no one important was watching. What kind of father-in-law, what kind of husband, what kind of family my daughter had entered. 4 years later, I had my answer. Laurent arrived at 8 the following morning with a manila folder and a look on his face that I have learned to take seriously. It's significant, he said. He was understating. The audit showed 18 months of systematic fraud, inflated invoices from shell vendors, payments routed through accounts that didn't correspond to any real supplier. The total, across the period examined, $412,000, moved into a numbered account, registered in my son-in-law's father's name. There was more. In the week before my daughter received her termination email, someone had used her login credentials to access the company's accounting system during off hours. 3 financial reports had been quietly amended. If anyone came looking for irregularities, the trail would lead to her desk. He hadn't just pushed her out, he had planned to frame her. I set the folder down. I picked up my phone and called Carla. Carla has been my lawyer for 18 years. She does not waste words, and she does not lose cases she has prepared properly. I told her to come to the house. I told her to bring everything she had. At 3:30 that afternoon, my son-in-law called. We were in the living room, my daughter, Carla, with her legal pad, my grandson on the floor doing something complicated with wooden blocks. I nodded when Sky held up the screen. She answered. She put it on speaker. His voice was measured in that way that is really just control wearing a civil costume. We need to deal with this situation, he said. What situation? Your mother getting involved, the separation, all of it. A pause. My parents are prepared to be reasonable if you cooperate. Cooperate how? Sign a statement. Acknowledge there were errors in the filing system, errors that came from your account. In exchange, we don't pursue it further. I didn't make any errors. His tone didn't quite change, but something in it did. Sky, I'm trying to protect you here. If this escalates, if a formal complaint goes through, you won't come back from that. Carla's pen moved. And Beau, my daughter asked. The pause this time was 2 seconds long and deliberate. My parents have a stable home, resources, everything a child needs to thrive. His voice softened in the particular way I now recognized as technique. I don't want the courts involved, but you need to understand that I have options. The call ended. Carla looked up from her notepad. Custodial coercion. Recorded. Third instance I can use. She made 3 more notes. With the financial evidence, the false credential use, and this call, we don't just defend your daughter. We dismantle him. 2 days later, Laurent put a second file on my desk. A woman named Fern, 36 years old, landscape architect, East Vancouver. She had met my son-in-law approximately 4 years ago, before he ever met my daughter. They had lived together for 7 months. The relationship had ended with a police report filed with the Vancouver Police Department. Financial manipulation, unauthorized bank account access, sustained psychological pressure. He had been gone before the report was formally processed. The photograph Laurent had printed showed a woman with precise features and careful eyes. The kind of face that has learned to keep its own counsel. Can you arrange a meeting? I asked. She said she's been hoping someone would call, he said. She came to my house on a Thursday morning, arriving exactly when she said she would, in a gray jacket and practical boots, and she stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw my daughter sitting at the table. I have seen that moment of recognition before. Not recognition of a face, but of something underneath. 2 people who have been through a version of the same thing and know it without being told. My daughter poured the tea without being asked. He told me I was too sensitive, Fern said, that the people in my life didn't understand what we had, that I was lucky someone like him was willing to put in the effort. My daughter looked at her over the rim of her cup. He told me I was too emotional, that my family was undermining us, that he was the only one who really understood me. Fern nodded. Then my account was drained the week he left. He said it was a loan I'd agreed to. I had no documentation. Nothing. Her jaw tightened. I thought maybe I'd misremembered. You hadn't, my daughter said. They talked for 2 hours. Carla took notes for part of it and sat quietly with her hands folded for the rest, because some conversations need to be what they are before they become evidence. But the evidence, when it came, was something else entirely. Laurent had recovered security camera footage from the building where Fern had lived. A Strata Corporation camera mounted at the front entrance, date stamped. My son-in-law in a blue jacket, his posture studied and his expression perfectly calibrated, dropping to one knee on her doorstep. The words came through clearly. He had been in therapy. He had changed. He had never stopped loving her. She had shut the door in his face. 8 months later, from a neighbor's porch camera on my daughter's old street, same jacket, same posture, same words, delivered at the same tempo, the same manufactured crack in the voice at the same moment. To my daughter. Carla played both clips back to back on my laptop. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "This is the cleanest pattern evidence I have seen in 22 years of family law in this province." The Vancouver Heritage Foundation's spring fundraising dinner was held the 2nd week of May at a private club in Cole Harbour. The kind of room designed to make certain people feel their position in the world is architectural. Permanent, load-bearing, impossible to challenge. My son-in-law's father was receiving the evening's community leadership recognition. The announcement had gone out weeks before his world had begun to unravel. The foundation had not yet thought to withdraw the invitation. I had been a sustaining donor for 11 years. My name was on the reading room wall. I had spoken to their audio-visual coordinator the previous week. We arrived early. Fern came in a dark burgundy dress. My daughter wore navy, her hair back, and she moved through the room without apology, which is exactly what I had been hoping to see. I wore gray. I always wear gray to these things. Invisible is its own kind of power. My son-in-law's father received his award at 8:15. He thanked the foundation. He used the word integrity. He talked about building something lasting, something a family could be proud of. He was smooth about it. The performance of someone who had practiced in the mirror until it stopped feeling like performance. The room dimmed for a video presentation. What appeared on the screen was not a tribute. Bank records, vendor payment logs, transactions highlighted in red, with account numbers visible at the top of the page. His account, his name. $412,000, documented in full, date by date. The room went the particular kind of quiet that means everyone has understood at the same moment. He looked at the screen. He looked toward the control booth at the back of the room. He reached for the microphone. The microphone gave nothing back. The screen changed. 2 panels, side by side. My son-in-law at Fern's door. My son-in-law at my daughter's door. The same kneeling posture. The same careful expression. The same words, playing simultaneously in a murmured echo across the room. I have been to enough events in this city to know what 300 people in a room sounds like when something has genuinely shocked them. It sounds like that. Fern stood from her chair. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "My name is Fern," she said. "I met that man 4 years ago. He said I was the only person who truly understood him. He cleared out my savings account and was gone before I could file anything that went anywhere." She paused. 8 months later, he gave that exact speech to another woman. This woman. My daughter stood beside her. I walked to the front of the room and took the microphone from the podium. "The Alderton Group," I said, "has operated for 6 years under the assumption that Clifton Alderton built it. He did not. I own it. I have owned the controlling interest since its founding through a BC-numbered company and a family trust. Clifton Alderton has been defrauding it for 18 months. He used my daughter's system credentials to conceal what he was doing, and he positioned it so that she would carry the consequences." 300 people, complete silence. My son-in-law spent at least 4 years moving through a pattern, targeting, isolating, financially draining, then moving on when there was nothing left to take. Tonight, that pattern is fully documented and it ends. The doors at the back of the room opened. 2 RCMP officers in uniform and a civilian financial investigator moved through the crowd with the quiet efficiency of people who know exactly where they are going. They had been briefed the previous evening. I had provided everything. My son-in-law's father looked at the screen. He looked at me. He looked toward the exit which had been accounted for. The handcuffs made very little sound. My son-in-law had arrived late and positioned himself near the bar at the far side of the room. And he discovered that the geography of the evening had been thought about more carefully than he had. They were let out before the main course. 3 weeks later, in a courtroom on Smythe Street, I sat between Carla and my daughter and listened to a judge read the terms that had taken Carla 8 days to finalize. My son-in-law's father entered a guilty plea on 4 counts of fraud over $5,000 under the Criminal Code of Canada. Full restitution. A 15-year prohibition on serving as a director of any corporation in this country. My son-in-law received his sentencing in a separate proceeding, fraud, theft, and criminal harassment, with pattern conduct as an aggravating factor. The family court matter was resolved in my daughter's favor, sole guardianship, with supervised access available at such time as my son-in-law could demonstrate sustained rehabilitation. Given his circumstances, that was unlikely to be soon. My daughter squeezed my hand as they were let out. "Is it over?" she asked. "The part that involves them," I said. "The rest is just yours." By June, Skye had been formally installed as Director of Operations at the Alderton Group. I had made the announcement through the holding company the week prior. The staff received it the way good people receive competent leadership, with visible relief. She didn't make a speech. She sat down at the desk, asked for the quarterly reports, and got to work. I watched her from the hallway for perhaps 30 seconds. Then I went home, because she didn't need me to watch. Fern, meanwhile, had spent those weeks fielding calls. Other women who had seen the news coverage, who had recognized something in what was described, who had their own versions of the same story. She came to me with a proposal, a registered society, a small office on Main Street, peer support and legal navigation resources for women dealing with financial manipulation and coercive control. I wrote the check that same afternoon. She looked at the number for a long moment. "This is more than I asked for." "Consider it a floor," I said, "not a ceiling." On a Saturday morning in late May, when the weather had finally remembered it was spring, I took my grandson to Stanley Park. Skye came with us. She wore jeans and her old running shoes and left her hair down for the first time in months, and she looked like herself. Not the version of herself that had been slowly worn away, but the one I had always known was underneath it, waiting. Beau ran ahead of us along the seawall with his arms spread wide, completely ignoring the geese, who returned the favor. He found something near the totem poles, a stone with an interesting shape, and brought it back to the seriousness of someone presenting significant findings. "This is a good one," he said. "It is," I agreed. "You should keep it." He put it in his coat pocket and ran off to find another. Skye sat beside me on a bench facing the water. The North Shore Mountains were clear above the inlet, sharp and clean in the morning air. A container ship moved slowly toward the port. "I keep thinking about all the things I should have seen," she said. "You saw what he needed you to see," I said. "He had practiced that version of himself on someone else before you. He had a script and he knew exactly when to run it, and he delivered it to a person who had no reason not to believe him. That isn't your blindness. That is his design." She was quiet for a moment. The shame was the worst part. I felt ashamed before I even fully understood what had happened to me. "The shame is part of the system," I said. "It's what keeps people silent until it's too late. They count on it. They build it deliberately." Beau came back and wedged himself between us on the bench with his collection of stones, leaned against his mother's arm, and began telling us about the geese whom he had apparently approached and found uncooperative. My daughter put her arm around him without thinking. "The way you do when something is simply yours." We sat like that for a while. The water moved. The mountains held their place. Ordinary Saturday life proceeded at its ordinary Saturday pace all around us, which felt, after everything, like its own kind of gift. "Were you ever frightened?" Skye asked me. "When you were building everything from scratch, were you ever actually afraid?" I thought about the earliest years, the single contract I couldn't afford to lose. The mornings when the margin between staying open and closing was measured in days. Her father leaving. The morning after he left, going to the office anyway, because there was a company to run and a daughter to raise, and no one else coming through the door to do either. "Yes," I said, "but I learned to make fear useful. It sharpens your attention. It is not, however, an instruction." She leaned her head on my shoulder. The freighter disappeared behind the tree line. The light on the water shifted the way West Coast light does in late May, that particular gold that lasts only 20 minutes before it changes into something else entirely. My grandson announced he had found what he believed was the best stone in the park and would be keeping it permanently. He produced it from his pocket for verification. We verified it. He returned it to his pocket with great satisfaction. We stayed on that bench until the cold came in off the inlet. Then we walked home together along the path. Bo between us with a coat full of stones, my daughter telling him the names of the trees, my grandson correcting her when he thought she was wrong, which was often and confidently. If you have stayed with me this far, I need you to hear this clearly. The people who do this, who isolate the ones they claim to love, who control their money, their friendships, their sense of what is real, they depend on two things without exception. They depend on silence, and they depend on the belief that no one is watching closely enough to see the pattern for what it is. They are wrong about both. Mothers watch. We have always watched. It does not stop when our children grow up and move away and build lives we can no longer see into directly. It simply becomes quieter, more patient, more certain of what it knows. And when someone leaves my daughter and my grandson at a train station with 2 suitcases and the expectation that I won't know what to do, what they have actually handed me is a reason. Love should not make you disappear. It should not make you smaller, quieter, more apologetic, more uncertain of what you know to be true. If someone is doing that to you, carefully, gradually, in ways that are difficult to name, that is not love. Please hear me, that is not love. It is never too late to recognize it. Never too late to call your mother or your sister or someone you trust. Never too late to get in the car. If this story meant something to you, please like and share it. There is someone watching right now who needs to hear that they are not alone in this. Subscribe to Precious Revenge so you don't miss what comes next. And leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've seen this pattern. Take care of each other. I mean that more than I know how to say. Take very good care.